I just want to give a brief welcome. I'm Monty Monash, and I am the facilitator for today's meeting, as well as my colleague, Kimberly Manning. Kimberly, you want to come on screen? So the two of us will be able to, we will be guiding the conversation along, keeping time, and sharing a few points for notes and updates. And then we'll have some opening remarks. If Director Wells is able to join us, we'll have him share a few remarks, as well as CEO David Gaddis from DC Water. We'll then have a report out of all the action teams that we've been working with over the last few weeks between our last full task force meeting, and we'll share what's going on there with the progress of those action teams and what we've been discussing in the categories. And then we will share a little bit of information about the public listening sessions that will be coming up in March. That will come a little later in the meeting. We'll follow that with next steps on what we're going to be doing, a little bit of homework perhaps, and some notes about what we need to follow up on. And then we'll close out with a few housekeeping notes and any other kind of updates and announcements. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next slide. So just a recap for those of you that might be new to this meeting or to the public that might be listening for the first time. The summary of this full task force is that it was kicked off in November. We had a kickoff meeting on November 17th, 2021. We kicked that meeting off based on this flood task force was created because of this in response to the floods in September of 2020. And it was established by the city administrator on September 23rd, 2021. Leading the flood task force on behalf of the city administrator is the Deputy Mayor of Operations and Infrastructure, Lucinda Babers. Also co-chairing this flood task force is DC Water's CEO, David Gaddis, and DOEE's Director, Tommy Wells. Flood task force members include, next slide please, 13 District of Columbia agencies, and they're all listed here, a little bit of alphabet soup. The next slide, please. We have 16 consulting members, and those are comprised of folks from the public sector as well as federal agencies that are partners to our work in and around the district. Next slide, please. So all proceedings for the task force are done in the public realm. Task force and action team meetings are held publicly on WebEx via WebEx. We also will have some public listening sessions that will be held separately twice during this process. We'll have our first grouping of public listening sessions in March of this year, and then we'll have another set further in the year in probably late summer, early fall. All meetings and documents are posted onto the website. Next slide. The website is dcfloodtaskforce.org. There's lots of information there, all archival information as well as upcoming information. Next slide, please. So we have a little bit of a timeline just to keep everybody up to date on where we are and how we are proceeding with this task force. Our action teams meet monthly. The action teams are basically committees or subcommittees. And these action teams have been split up into two groups. We have the residential resilience, which meets on the second Tuesday of every month, and the governance and coordination, which meets on the second Friday of every month. The full flood task force, like today's meeting, they meet on the third Wednesday of every other month. The complete and final report from all the work that's being done within the action teams and the full task force, that will be due in November of 2022, later this year. This report will have an action plan that addresses each of the 9 categories that we have been working on. The task force will continue to meet annually after that report is completed, and we will track progress on the action plan and also discuss future budgeting and action plan priorities. Next slide, please. So here we are on January 19th. The process, as you see, continues on through the fall. Next slide. And we have some goals for today's meeting. We want to report out the action team progress to the full task force so that everyone's knowledgeable about what's been talked about in the residential resilience, as well as the governance and coordination action team meetings. We'll also review action ideas. We've come up with an effort benefit matrix to evaluate the projects that are being discussed in the 9 categories. We will also gain some feedback, hopefully with a great conversation later in today's meetings, dealing with or around the ideas, evaluations, and priorities of each of these categories. We'll also discuss a plan for what we're proposing to have with public listening sessions. Next slide, please. So with that, I'd like to, I'm not sure, Director Wells, are you able to talk at this point?
He
I
said,
don't,
Monty, I got a text from him and he's saying that it's asking for a password.
okay.
And I sent
Uh,
him my invite, but he said it's still
yeah,
asking for
could
a
someone
password.
from his team please make sure that Director Wells has the password? And what we'll do is shuffle, because we're flexible, and we'll have you speak first, CEO Gaddis, if you don't mind, Mr. Gaddis.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And I want to first of all say thank you to all of the task force members that are with us today and all the agencies as well for your commitment and dedication to this initiative. It's an unbelievable initiative. And as Monty said, you know, the storms that we had in September 2020 really sort of set this whole thing in action, at least from my perspective. It was my first experience really with this, and it was something that I've really tried to drive my team to in saying that this is something that we want to correct. We want to be a part of the correction from as far as flooding goes in the district. I want to also thank Chairman Wells, and if he's not on yet, but I want to thank him for his co-leadership and co-chairman of this with me. Uh, we at DC Water are very very dedicated to resiliency from our perspective. We're so dedicated that it actually is one of our imperatives in our new strategic plan that we just unveiled, Blueprint 2.0. And resiliency is one of the imperatives, and it's all about operationalizing how we can really cope with and recover from disruptions like the flooding of September 2020. But we don't want to do it through a siloed approach or a siloed lens. We want to ensure that the balance of equity, sustainability, reliability, healthy, safety, and wellness, which are our other imperatives, are all harnessed into those measures and the practices that we perform on a day-to-day basis. This task force is just one of the tools that we think, from our perspective, that we're putting in our tool belt to overcome the flooding of the future. I really look forward to the recommendations that are forthcoming from this task force as we move forward, and how we prioritize all of the different recommendations that come forward. But we need everyone working on this with us. This is not just for one agency or one organization, and we really look forward to opening our arms and working with everyone, with all the agencies in the district, to overcome flooding in the future. So again, Monty, I want to thank you and thank the other leaders that are on the line for availing yourselves to you know, and your teams to this initiative. Uh, it is going to be a model for a number of other cities throughout the country. And I'll end with this: the U.S. Conference of Mayors is is here in D.C. this week, and I've been visiting with a number of different organizations and some of the mayors from other cities, and they are also plagued with this flooding issue. And I talked to them about this new task force, and so I know that this will be a model for other cities to really look at in the future. So thank you, Monty.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Gaddis. We are also, as a working group, we're working so closely with your team, and they've been doing a tremendous job in spearheading and taking on a lot of the leadership role here. A lot of their thoughts are on paper. It's what we're working off of right now as templates. And so it's really what's kind of sparking some of these, some of the direction. And so we're really appreciative of your team. And with that, I want to just say thank you so much for your remarks. And you're right, this will
Thank
be a model, and we're in the right direction. It's incredible to see how all the different agencies are at the table and offering their time and energy to the same effort, which is a testament to what we do in the district, which is, collaborating and partnering, and we do it well. So thank
you.
you.
Great.
It
Thank you.
looks like Director Wells is on the line now. Hopefully he'll be able, Director Wells,
You'll
can
have to
you
invite
hear
him
us?
in and you'll have to let him in to speak because he joined as an attendee, I think, Monty.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Stephanie, if you don't mind letting
Yeah,
him in, and then,
he's a presenter. He should be able to speak.
Okay, am I in? Am I in?
Yes.
yes, great, we have you. So now our other co-chair, Director Tommy Wells, will just share some opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. I think next time I'll need to practice or something, but for whatever reason, iPad would never, or whatever, it just wouldn't come in. So I'm here initially as an attendee, but thank you to Director Gaddis. He's spot on with everything that he said. And I just want to acknowledge that I know that we've got some of the best professionals in the country working on this, from DC Water to DOEE, but then your counterparts at the sister agencies, whether it be ORM, DISB, DDOT, certainly DCRA, all the different agencies that, and DPR, that will be part of having to make our city flood resilient in the future. And so we know that these events will continue to happen, and that there's an expectation and certainly our responsibility to protect the city as an overall asset. It affects our bond ratings. It affects the cost of doing business. It affects the reliability of businesses to locate here. It impacts the confidence that residents have living here, public transportation. It goes to the very basic way of life as we deal with climate change, especially flooding. We certainly have long periods of high heat coming, and they've already started, but this task force focused on flooding. It's key to be able to have a thriving city and a resilient city. And so we all work with urgency, but I also know that the climate has changed. So we will adopt, hopefully as a task force, measures along the way as we identify measures of things we need to do. We do not need to wait until the end of this process. Certainly we'll come out with a checklist that will be given to the mayor and given to all the agency directors of what their responsibilities will be for protecting our city and making it resilient in a now in the new changed environment. But we will adopt these recommendations as we go so that we don't have to wait. And I'm committed to fighting to get them into the budget on behalf of the city administrator. So we're here on behalf of the city administrator. And so when there's recommendations coming forward, we will we'll put them forward through the city administrator, which will also include infrastructure monies, the monies that we apply for, things that will apply to the federal requirements to make the city more resilient, and then for any other future funding that comes through. So thank you to everybody for your work that you've done to date. Thank you to my co-chair, David Gaddis, and his team, who's really a rock star team. And then, of course, Tamani and your team for facilitating us through this. It's incredibly important work for the future of our city. And so this is time well spent. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wells, and I appreciate that. And just, I would be remiss if I didn't say your team is doing, again, equally as much of a heavy lift to pull together the coordinating documents so that we can push it out to the team leads. And it's just been a really wonderful experience working with everyone. Everyone's so knowledgeable and really top in their field. So we are working with the best, literally. With that, I do want to just move us forward so that we can keep time. We're going to get into reporting out of the action teams. Can you go to the next slide, please? And with that, I'd like to bring Nick from DOE. Nick, you want to take the next couple of slides?
Sure. Thanks, Monty. So now this is the portion of the agenda where we start to get into hopefully the discussion between all the task force members. And before we do that, just a little bit of setup so that everybody on the call knows kind of where we're trying to head. So we'll start with kind of just an overview of how we're structuring the task force. So today, the full task force, this is kind of everybody coming together. But before this meeting, we've actually had two what we call action team meetings. We have a residential resilience action team and a governance and coordination action team. And under each of those action teams, they're kind of responsible for specific action categories. And if you go to the next slide. So just as an example, action category number 3, and all these categories were laid out in the original letter from the city administrator. But as an example, action category 3 is anything having to do with floodproofing homes, and every action category has a lead agency. So in this case, it's DOEE, but DOE is not the lead agency for all the action categories. And I just want to point out, if you go to the next slide, yep, thank you. So long term, what we're trying to get to in November of 2022 is having at least one action plan, one of those little dots for every action category. That was kind of the mandate of the city administrator's letter. So that's where we're headed. And then, today, and actually what we've been doing over the past couple months is we've been coming up with ideas, all those little blue dots. We've been trying to come up with ideas, brainstorm them, start to categorize and think about, effort and impactfulness. And so that's really where we are here today, is that we are hoping to have a conversation with everybody on this call, starting to present some of those initial ideas along with some initial, what we're calling categorizations, to help us think through about what would be most effective. So that's what we're hoping to do today. And so you see on the screen, I'm just going to show this quickly. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but we are planning to, category by category, look at the action ideas that have come out of the action teams so far. So not just look at them, but also try and score them on a low, medium, high scale, both on effort and value. So that's what you see here. And the reason we're trying to do the green, yellow, red is just to help us start to think about each of these ideas. Which are the ones that are going to take a lot of effort? Which are the ones that are going to have really high value, high return for the work that we put in? And so I'm going to spend just a minute on this slide because this sets up the conversation that we want to have, for the next 50, 60 minutes. So essentially, for every idea, we've at least made a draft attempt at scoring them on the top bar, which is effort, and then on the bottom bar, kind of benefit and value. So on the effort side, there's kind of 3 components we see to that. Overall kind of level of effort. So is this something that a single agency can do? We kind of rate that in the green. Or is this something that is going to require multiple agencies, federal agencies, like a consensus building process? That would be on the higher effort scale. And then there's the time to complete. Is this something we can do in a year? Is this something that's going to take 5 years or more? And then in the cost range, is it under $1 million, 1 to 10 million, or over 10 million? And these, we're happy to hear feedback on the categorization of these, but really the goal is that by starting to think about the level of effort and the time and the cost for each of these, that we start to get a little bit more sense of what we're actually asking in each action, but also to kind of separate out some of the differences between the different ideas. So that's the effort side. And then the other side here is the benefit value. So we're looking for kind of 3 components of that. So one is, the scale of benefit. If we do an action, how many people is it going to actually benefit? How many people is it going to impact? So if it's going to be a really high benefit, it's something that can apply citywide, versus a lower benefit is something that's really an action that's really only specific to a neighborhood or a smaller area. Resilience outcome is you have to distinguish between, you could have a small thing, like you could give waterproof electrical outlets to everybody in the city. And that has a small reduction in your flood risk, but it's, it's not, it wouldn't have the same reduction as, for example, installing an entire new levee. So that's what this resilience outcome is trying to get at. Are we, when you implement this idea, are you substantially reducing flood risk, or is it, more on the smaller flood risk reduction? And then lastly, this is the prioritized vulnerable communities. That was something that was put into the city administrator's letter as an important way for us to think about any ideas that come out of the flood task force. And so for folks on this call who've been a part of the action teams meeting, we kind of briefly mentioned this, so this is new that you're seeing here. But the idea is that, things that are going to prioritize specifically, and are targeted to vulnerable populations, that should have the highest score in this component. And then if it's not specifically targeted, maybe it has a lower score. So that is generally how we're color coding all of these things. And, we're intentionally keeping these a little bit subjective, and we're not trying to put numbers on anything. It's really just to get a broad categorization and get the conversation going. And then ultimately, if you go to the next slide, ultimately what we're looking for is to, if you take all of the components in the effort category and all the components in the value category, we can kind of stick them together and look at each action idea from the perspective of a benefit and effort matrix. And so just to highlight a couple of things on here, if something is high effort but also high value, we're calling that a big bet, and that's something we still want to consider. The things we for sure want to consider are the high value and low effort things. Those are kind of like the win-win category. And then the things we probably want to avoid are the things that will take a lot of effort but will only return kind of like a minimal value. So we're trying to, this is ultimately what we're trying to get. We're trying to put all of these ideas that we have from the action teams, from the public, and kind of think about them this way, because we're approaching the task force with the sense that we don't have an unlimited budget. There are lots of priorities for the city. Flooding will be one of them, but it's not like we can, any idea we come up with, we can't just assume that we're going to have the money to do it. So this whole process is meant to help prioritize and raise the ideas that that we want to go to the top. So
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. That's no simple feat to explain kind of the complex evaluation process that we've created so that we can now move into what the work has been in these action teams. And it's a very big simplification of what how complicated and high level these conversations have been to get us to where we are now. And again, to remind everyone, we are not too far along in the process. It's the beginning. We have some really good information down on paper that has been captured in the conversations from the action team meetings, but we still have much more to do. And this will also include the public and their input and their feedback on where we are. So we'll do a check-in with the public twice in this process, and more if we need to, but for right now we have scheduled twice. So just want to make sure that people are absolutely clear on the fact that the public is a big partner in this conversation, and they have not been forgotten. It's just coming up next. So with that, I wanted to just remind everyone that we do have, again, 2 action teams: residential and resilience. There are 9 and governance and coordination, and there are 9 categories, and we split them up. And up first, we're going to have Salil and Opera talk through, as leads, talk through these 4 sections, and they each one of those categories have an agency lead that is working with a smaller group as well. So again, lots of complicated things. We're trying to break it down into bite-sized opportunities so that we can come out with some success. So thank you, Opera and Salil.
Thank you, Marty. And Nick, you did a fabulous job explaining a very, I wouldn't say complicated, but a well laid out matrix to come up. In the end, the last slide, I believe that was 22 that Nick showed, which was the 4 squares. is where we do want to thank you very much. That's where we want to end up. Now, for each one of the teams, there's a whole bunch of ideas. We started with something right on the page to begin with, just to start the discussions. But through the last couple of conversations we've had at the action team levels, there's been fantastic ideas coming through. The other thing that came through is several of these ideas are interlinked. So they're not distinct and standing out there by themselves. But in the end, we all ideas are good, they're all beneficial, but we can't do them all at once. So what Nick just showed out here on this slide is this is a way to try and categorize them. So those that are quick wins, that we can get them out of the way quickly. Those that are win-wins with low effort, high benefit. So we can just prioritize how we want to execute these ideas. With that, if you would go on, thank you, to the first one, which is residential resilience. And this is a great discussion that we had last week. Philip Barlow is going to lead this. But one of the things that came out last week is Jed Ross was also on this call with Office of Risk Management. I hope I said that right. Had phenomenal input into this. And there's a big portion of insurance that comes under his department. Philip, do you want to just go through this quickly with what we discussed?
Sure. Thank you, Salil. I guess I'll start out by saying currently we have 6 ideas that you can see on the display. Those are not necessarily the final ideas. I mean, I think we are still accepting ideas and still looking through them, and also you can see that we have started the effort and benefit analysis. That is still, I don't think we've quite finalized that yet. We had a good discussion about that at our call last week. But there, to briefly run through the items, there's a community insurance product that would, rather than focusing on a specific property, it would focus on a group of properties. Parametric insurance product that's kind of a newer kind of insurance that is not triggered by loss. It's triggered by, a trigger. When a trigger is met, a loss is paid regardless of whether there is a loss. So that's a little bit different than traditional insurance. Flood insurance subsidies, joining FEMA's community rating system, sewer line backup insurance, and insurance-focused outreach. I'll say that unfortunately, I'm not sure. I mean, we're still looking at it, but I think the ones that give you the biggest bang have the biggest effort. I don't know that we've identified anything so far that's quick and easy to do with a high impact. But we are continuing to take new ideas and refine the ideas that we have and look at the effort. And I think that's kind of a little overview of the items under the insurance category. And I think I'm turning it over to see if anybody has any ideas or thoughts about or questions about the items on this list.
Philip, thank you. We can also add them to the chat so we can capture ideas as we go along and comments.
I also just, Salil and Philip, I just wanted to also mention the coloration on the categorization for the matrix is still a work in progress. I know we mentioned it before, but I wanted to just bring to the attention that the prioritization of vulnerable populations has not been categorized yet. So other categories further along in the presentation have had a stab at it, but this one has not. Just want to make sure that folks know that.
Thank you, Monty.
Thanks,
and
Monty.
I'm just going to echo what Philip said, which is this is very dynamic. So this is an initial coloration based on a quick start of these categories. But as they start getting developed, we may find the coloration changed as we generate more information. But it's just the key is to get started on these. So Philip, thank you very much.
Sure,
Can we
and
go
I
to
will
the-
say, I'll say just briefly, you know, I mean, there's all these colors on there, and I think you know, what I think something that's both quick and easy would be green all the way across. So rather than trying to go back and look at the other chart where it kind of identified what's you know, what's sort of good and what's sort of bad. The way I kind of look at this is, you know, the more green, the better. And the perfect, you know, a perfect one would be something that's, like I said, green straight across.
That would be nice. Thank you. Monty, would you go to the next category, please?
Actually, maybe just pausing here for a minute. You know,
Sure.
I think what we're hoping for, I think, so folks who haven't been involved in the action team meetings, you know, we're really keen on getting your thoughts. If something pops out that you're thinking of, that, you know, either makes a lot of sense or doesn't make a lot of sense, you know, we'd love to hear the input or new ideas. You know, just so you know, I mean, the action teams, we have had some, you know, pretty detailed conversations about some of these. So, you know, we can keep kind of going along that effort, but this, you know, we're hoping that this full task force meeting is a chance to help provide some more direction. I think especially to the action teams as we kind of keep considering this, get public feedback, and then start digging into like how would we actually do action 1.1? What would that look like? So just trying to offer a place for you know, any of the leadership or folks that haven't been involved. You know, if you see something that interests you or you feel like would be worth pursuing further, this would be a great time to kind of speak up as we go through.
Thank you, Nick. Opera, would you like to add anything to this before we move to the next category?
No, I think the conversation is good. Thank you.
Sorry, if I could, I'll just add one other thing that I think you kind of referenced in your comments earlier. But one of the things I think that we did have a discussion about in our last meeting about sort of the insurance related one. So, you know, primarily the first and the second one is whether we wanted to go through the Office of Risk Management and do them sort of as a city project, or do them through the private insurance market that currently exists in the district. I think that's you know, that's a big high-level decision that's going to affect you know, it won't affect the underlying products, but I think those are we do have at least two very different ways to go about putting those insurance-related issues into place, and I think we will have more discussion about that as we move forward.
I do want to, don't want to interrupt, but I do want to make sure we stay on time, and also recognize a note in the chat from Lindsay that she appreciates the recognition of the need for flood insurance subsidy. I would hope that subsidy would be offered through a separate program so that the insurance pricing itself can reflect the true level of risk. So we will make sure all these notes are captured, but I just wanted to bring that up and then keep us on time as we go through this, because we have a robust conversation that could go on. This could be like a whole weekend seminar. So I'll be the bad guy on the timekeeping.
Hey, Kimberly and Philip, that was an excellent point you made towards the end about the two choices, and that would be explored more as we move along. Kimberly, if we could now go to the next one, which is residential resilience, category 2. Vermisia, would you like to take us on this one?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
We sure can.
Okay, great. So good afternoon. I'm Vermisia, also representing Homeland Security Emergency Management Agency as the project lead for category 2. To summarize this initiative, Nick, please jump in if needed. It's intended to support residents shortly after a flood to assist residents with through repairs. So what that could look like, this could be providing remediation, such as cleanup services. And while we're thinking through this and strategizing on how this new governmental service would benefit our most impacted residents, some questions that we were thinking through and working on to find an answer for, and I think that kind of tees up some of the things that was discussed in category 1, was which agency would implement it, and if so, how would this be implemented? Is it through an existing service? There is potentially some service areas that this could streamline into, but that we would need to have more conversations about that. In terms of the level of effort, as you can see, there's a lot there blank. So there's a lot more conversation I see that we need to have since this is a new service. And we do believe that it's a multi-agency action, which would take a few years, will take at least a year to implement. From our perspective, some ideas that we could now, which while we're establishing this program, that have a great impact on reducing risk, is improving public education and awareness of current and potential future risk. In addition to the already existing outreach that's done within the floodplain, we could also have targeted outreach to those in areas where they could be at risk, potentially to sewer backup due to where they live. We had some breakouts, some additional actions that we're thinking through for action 2.4 that's on the screen. But we would love to hear from you all and see if there's any other things that we're missing. Overall, for this category, I kind of shared what the intent was. But one thing that should be noted, that in some respects, it's like a bridge to category 3 and 4, which will be discussed, flood smart homes and the backbow rebate program from my perspective, just because we do want to be able to assist residents in that short term right after a flooding, but then we do want to be able to consult and provide some other options for long-term solutions that they potentially could face. So I'll stop there, and we'll love to hear any additional feedback on what we have thus far. Again, as you can see, we're still going through the level of effort that will be taken. So let me stop there for you all to provide more feedback and input on what we have so far.
Thank you very much. We have a long program and an effort. You have amazing information, and I don't want to be.
I already got the call down. Okay. I'll take it.
The drummer, but we do want to keep moving so that we can get through everything and realize that we probably need to add more time to our next call. So,
well, Ramesh, you made an excellent point that no one category is a standalone, and they're all bridges between each other, and we have to draw that connection to make it successful. Thank you. And thank you for presenting.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you,
Kimberly, would you go to the next one, please? It's Nick. Nick, you're back.
Yeah. So this category we're calling flood-proofing individual homes and facilities. So this is, contrast this to what Vermecia was just talking about, which is a flood happens, and how are we going to help the residents that have flooded? That was category 2. That's what Vermecia was mentioning. This category is before it floods. We know certain homes have more risk than others. So what can we do to have those homes make themselves more resilient so they're less likely to be flooded the next time? So there's, I think, 2 kind of primary ideas here. One is what we're calling flood smart home retrofits. And the other is providing elevation surveys. So elevation surveys are kind of like the first step to doing anything to your home. You need to, it's about an $800 thing that you need to have a surveyor come out and measure like how high your the opening of the door or the window is. And then you can use that information to upgrade your home. But I will point out that so action 3.1 flood smart home retrofits, we have put in, DOE has put in the FY23 budget an enhancement request that I know we've sent this around to the task force members with some information, but that's something we're hoping to get in the FY23 budget and start piloting that program to help homes that are primarily in wards 7 and 8, because that's where most of the single family homes that are in the floodplain are, to help start doing that. So that's those are the two main ideas we had for this category. Happy to hear any thoughts or comments.
Thank you, Nick. Aren't any comments? Kimberly, can we go to the next one?
Yes.
Thank you. So this is the sewer line backups and backwater valve installation. This actually ties into almost all the categories, starting from insurance to what Vermecia talked about. And a big portion of this is a discussion with Chris Bailey of DCRA, and I'm just going to call on him in a little bit. We just want to bring a piece of information here. Vermecia has been a huge help and a partner. I believe we've just applied for some funding from FEMA to help with backwater valve installations for disadvantaged communities or homes. So that's going to be a big help, and that'll jumpstart this effort. But the fact of the matter remains is if you have a bathroom fixture below grade, below the top of a manhole, periodically the manholes will surcharge for a range of reasons, and there has to be protection. And I know it's in the current DCRA code. It may not have always been there, but Chris Bailey has been a tremendous help in helping understand how we could go about helping people talk about the need for this, and also how do we create a requirement to add in backwater valves after the fact. It's not going to be straightforward, and it's going to take a village to work this through. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you for the accolades, but I would just like to say that this is something that we've already been looking into during each code cycle. So the fact that we are now making it an action item just allows us to bring it to the forefront for people's attention. So thank you.
Chris, thank you very much. Appreciate the partnership. Kimberly?
Next. Awesome. There we go.
We're moving right along, which makes me a little bit nervous. But we can keep going.
Do we want to pause for a minute and just talk about, I guess, residential protections in general?
Yeah, I think it's a good enough place to pause. Some of those 4 categories. I mean, does any seem more easily funded, more easily done, things that pique the interest of folks on this call?
Yeah, and I'll add, because we didn't get ratings put in for the prioritizing the vulnerable populations and communities yet, that there will definitely be some high benefit in many of these categories, because they are specifically targeting those communities, and that was a specific call from the city administrator that we needed to be looking at in these action plans. But there's definitely has to be some priority decisions made, I think, especially in the insurance realm, of how these programs get funded. So.
Hi, this is Jed Ross, Chief Risk Officer with Office of Risk Management. Thank you for that comment. Thank you, Philip, for your comments. I do think that the decision-making does need to be at the forefront for any of these prioritization for vulnerable populations, whether insurance or otherwise, are these governmental programs that are being managed and solely pushed forward by the district and DC Water, or are they programs where we're trying to bring the private market to bear in order to support them? So as we think about a community insurance program, a pool or a captive that's fully backed by the district, and it's district money that's supporting it and subsidizing heavily for members of the vulnerable populations to apply for insurance, that we then create an insurance product for them and go to the reinsurance marketplace. That's one decision we can pursue. It would require, a good deal of heavy lift on the legislative efforts, but is that the best way and the way that we know we're going to help support our vulnerable populations? I would argue, yes, it's the best way to ensure that will happen, comparative to creating some type of private structure that we then help to motivate and incentivize people. But that might be an easier way to tackle it. So I think there are just a lot of decisions that will have to be made about whether this is really the government doing it, or is it the government enabling the private marketplace in order to support parametric or anything else, or really getting our residents who don't have the resources or even the wherewithal or know-how to tackle some of these issues, to help streamline them, getting backwater valves or whatever the process might be. And those are some of the high-level decisions that we need to get to as a task force group to help make a recommendation to city leadership about where we think this should go. Is this governmental program, or is it a program that we're helping to ensure makes it easier while we continue to do outreach and guidance for our private residents to avail themselves?
Thank you, Jed.
Jed, just to pick up on that, I think what I heard is that the government program might be a little easier to stand up, but we might miss out on, we'd still have to promote and get people to sign up for insurance, whereas doing something with the private reinsurer would be maybe more difficult to stand up, but might better prioritize vulnerable communities. Did I summarize that correctly?
Close. What I would say is, if we create a governmental program, an insurance pool or captive insurance, people will come to the government to apply for insurance, and then we would be a government-backed insurance program. There's just an example. What same thing goes for backwater valves? Is it the district government? Are we actually bringing in a bunch of private contractors, and the individuals actually come to the district in order to apply, or are we making a list available to them and having them go and we're doing outreach, right? It's two different ways to skin the cat. It doesn't necessarily mean that one is better than the other. Some ways it's easier and better to have the private residents going to the private contractors, and we've kind of enabled or subsidized behind the scenes, and we're doing outreach and education and everything like that. And then it becomes private transactions where, yes, we're engaged, but it's still not really our obligation, except where we're helping to promote it, versus an actual program where people come to us, they apply, we then assign somebody who goes and does the work, and we have the contracts with those backwater valve companies, right? That's the same concept for insurance. So, if we created an actual insurance program where people come to the district to apply, we could have that situation. We would then go and get, more reinsurance to back it if it becomes a really significant and major loss. And then it's a district government program. There's legislation behind it, and we manage it for our vulnerable residents, versus we go to the insurance marketplace and we ask for them to do it. We figure out some subsidies. There's legislation where they get money for every person who applies. We go and do the education and outreach, and we get them to go to the private insurance carriers, who are then offering specialized products to the individuals. So there's different ways to tackle it Some are less burdensome on the government, but some, then you lose some controls. So it's really just a matter of decision making about what's the best thing for us to do. How innovative do we want to be? How much level of effort do we want to put forward? How much money do we want to put forward? Each of those kind of decisions will get triggered by what's our best way to help the most people. I would say is probably our threshold to be looking at. So just those are the things I think that we as a task force need to kind of think about. But Nick, to answer your question specifically, there's not necessarily one way that's definitively better than the other. It's a matter of, we're still going to do education and outreach no matter what. It's just private citizens to private solutions, or private citizens to the government who have the solutions. I think that's what we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way you're putting it makes total sense. I'm trying to think about how, the action teams can provide information to the flood task force to help, guide that decision. I don't know, we could definitely talk offline about it, but it does seem like that's going to be a really important thing to have input from the task force.
One of the things, Nick, that we would need to do is look to, because if we tried to do it through the private insurance market, we can't force them to, we can say, we want the best products in the world, but we can't force them to offer those products. So, we'd have to see whether there is an appetite or willingness from the private insurance companies to offer the kind of products that we think we want to have. And that's certainly one decision point to see, if we can get a sense of whether it would be available, even if we set up a structure to facilitate it.
But Philip and Jed, isn't one of the other issues that if we go private, there's no assurance that they will stay in the market? If it's not profitable, they might just pull out.
Yep, there are risks around that. We currently, and this is just for everyone's edification, we have a captive insurance agency that we issue insurance policies to two, used to be four, but two small local clinics who are taking care of vulnerable residents for medical malpractice. So we have specific legislation. The Office of Risk Management does that. And we issue out policies on behalf of these clinics. And then we have a fund that backs them, and they pay a subsidized premium to us, the district. So we already have kind of a map for it, but we would have to do a significant amount of work in order to recreate that, both legislatively, and then how many residents are we talking about? How many homeowners? Is it 1,500? Is it 500? How much money are we going to collect? It gets to be complex. We submit to DSB on an annual basis, our captive insurance agency, the District of Columbia's, as they're the regulator, because we are actually an insurance company. And the same could be done for all of our residents. But it becomes a government-backed program. There has to be a lot of money behind it. And then we have to, of course, continue to every year make sure we're getting people to participate in the program, make sure that it's subsidized appropriately, make sure that people are engaged. And then when there are losses, there are big floods, we would have a massive administrative process to pay out on all of those claims like an insurance company would. So it really becomes, the district becomes its own an insurer and an insurance carrier for our vulnerable populations, something that hasn't been done. I think it's a great idea. It's something we've talked about internally at ORM for many years, but it is a significant high level of effort, significant financial costs, something that we can do, but it would be be great revolutionary thing, but it would be a lot versus what Philip just spoke to, going to the insurance marketplace, figuring out a way if we can get legislatively money to give to the insurance carriers to subsidize any and every person who applies to them, do the education and outreach in order to make it more cost effective and ensuring that we're getting people to be engaged and partnering with the insurance marketplace. So they would actually promote, whether it be parametric insurance or other types of flood coverages for our vulnerable residents, both vulnerable to flood, and then of course our vulnerable residents who can't afford flood insurance right now. So those are just the two ways to think about it, I would say. And want to make sure that everyone heard that, so then we can be moving in the direction of decision making eventually. And as Philip said correctly, the insurance marketplace, yes, they have to participate. In the other realm, if the district handles it ourselves, we don't have to worry about them participating. We do have to worry about the financial cost of it, though. So just putting those out there.
And
Great distinction, and it was very educational. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Jed. I think we can go to the next one. And I think specifically on this insurance one, we probably need like a subcommittee to really hammer out these details. I guess look for that in the next couple of weeks.
Before we move on to the next category, there were a couple of notes in the chat. We had one from Karen Sistrunk in this conversation talking about maybe there should be some form of public-private partnership so that the cost is shared by the government, private industry, and consumers. And there was also a note from Jane Waters that we need to make sure that the private citizens renew annually to this insurance that we're talking about as a concept. So just want to keep those thoughts in mind as we continue to talk about the insurance conversation. And we'll move on.
All right. So now we're gonna switch to the governance and coordination categories. The first one is flood infrastructure projects. I'm going to pass it to Alan Pratt from DEMWA.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so this first one in governance and coordination is broken down into two main areas. I think one category a lot larger than the other. So the bigger one is prioritizing capital projects, and this is about basically taking the capital projects and flood infrastructure that is planned and prioritizing it based on this matrix that we have here. And I'll just note that this kind of the projects listed here under 5.1 vary pretty drastically in size and breadth. So kind of on one end of the spectrum, 5.1.7 is this Blue Plains flood wall, which would obviously be a single project, really big, really impactful. And that's reflected hopefully in the effort, benefit, and value here. Versus these district-wide small parks and open space, this would be kind of a cross-district effort of a bunch of smaller projects. So there is kind of that breadth, but it all falls under the banner of prioritizing capital projects. And then Action 5.2 on creating a more permanent design for P Street levee closure. Obviously, there's a lot more work that would need to be done other than just 5.2.1, which is identifying the agency responsible. But that would be kind of the starting point and a pretty low effort starting point towards getting this project underway. So happy to hear feedback on kind of the ratings here, as well as ideas for additional capital projects or additional things that would fall under the category of flood mitigation infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I think it's also worth mentioning, I think for a lot of the infrastructure projects, I think well, I'll just say, this is kind of the projects we know of now. I think, for example, you will hear us talk about the integrated flood model, which after we model, I think we're going to identify even more projects. And just as just as time passes and we see more flooding, there'll be new projects. So, but this is our start for now. We're open to adding more. And we're probably missing some that agencies are doing, but we can certainly add more to this list. And then I think annually we will try and update this and get task force input on prioritizing them.
Yeah, there was a discussion on the parks, which was very interesting, about doing a small demonstration scales to bring all the features together. So that could be like a showcase as to what can be done across the city.
Yeah, that's a great point. That could almost be 5.1.8.1. Go one level of dot deeper.
Okay, well, if there's no other discussion on category 5, again, we want to make sure everyone gives an opportunity for feedback and input into the discussion. And thank you, Alan, and others in this category that have worked to fill out, the further detail. But again, this is the time to add to it. And if you see something that needs to be adjusted, or if there's some emerging projects in your agency that are not noted here or in the public and federal sector that could influence or increase the opportunity to be successful, we'd love to hear about it as we continue to talk. So if there's nothing else more to talk about category 5, we'll move on to category 6. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm gonna queue up Chris Bailey from DCRA for the regulations, legislation, compliance, and permitting category.
Thank you, Nick. And I just want to start off and say that I've been looking at the color chart and understanding that green is low, yellow is medium, and then red, I believe, is high. But then does it flip into the benefits and values, I believe?
Right.
That might be a little confusing. It was to me at first until I, had to redo my chart over again. But since we're in that stage where we can fix a couple things, I'd like to revisit that. But let's start. 6.1 flood resilience legislation. I've brought this up and I'd like to just understand that this is a process, and this process can be had, throughout the code cycles. And when I say building code cycles, I'm referring to all of the code, the building code volume, which includes plumbing, mechanical, electrical, building codes, property maintenance, and the like, electrical, and so forth. And those things on a regular cycle are amended. And the DCMR, which is the DC Municipal Regulations, is that amended version of those building codes. So when we go to efforts and times and costs, that's just a recurring and a constant in our development cycle through the building codes. The flood resilience fee is something that we're going to have to really look at as a group, and I would like the input of some of the public as well as city leaders, because modifying fees really is a legislative process, and it's something that we can discuss and we can try to figure out the best way to move forward. But that's something that we're really going to have a proposal, set it forward, and see how it fares with the council as well as with the mayor's office. So it's possible, but that is a heavier lift. The flood hazard rules and construction codes, I've mentioned that, but let's actually go into what can happen with FEMA and the regulations that come down that we have to try to meet or work with. And DCRA and DOE has a great partnership in going back and forth and determining how to modify the Appendix G, which is our floodplain code section, as well as look at our backflow preventers in the plumbing code. So there are certain coordination things that we like to do outside of this group that are happening on the regular that could benefit. And we will definitely add a hierarchy to those in the future. Let's go to 6.5, enforcement and permitting. I'd like everybody to understand that it starts with communication. It starts with data, training, certifications, quality assurance, and quality checks throughout this process. Both educating the public, understanding their responsibility, their roles, and then providing access to information, providing updates to the website, providing useful information so that they, when designing, building, altering, repairing, they can make those decisions up front and then come to DCRA, come to DOEE, or any other agency that's helping them with the understanding that they're trying to meet the requirements that we have set forth in regulation. So that communication plan, that advertising, the website, and getting that information out. And then on the internal side, getting our staff, our processes, our programs to accept and document all of the changes, all of the updates, all of the things that are happening, so we can record that and we have a record of things moving through our systems. This actually plays into a lot of other topics that we kind of touch on, that we do need better data management. We do need to have this transparency with that data so that it can be available. All of that is kind of integrated in there. And we're going back and forth and determining whether or not, you know, what's the high, what's the low, what's the doable, what's the ease and everything. So we are looking at those. And then finally, federal facilities. We do not regulate federal facilities because we are a district agency. This would take a lot of creative thinking and a lot of working with our federal partners to understand what the actual need from DCRA as well as other DC agencies can do for the federal facilities. But all the information that we gather, all the coordination, all this communication that we've, you know, that we're trying to bring together could definitely help some sort of coordination between the feds and the district government. So I don't say that this is not something that we want to take on, but it's something that we can use in maybe a different format, maybe a different mission or direction. Instead of regulating federal facilities, maybe we can have a partnership with federal facilities and give them the information and the ability to make those improvements that we've deemed possible and available to, you know, to the district residents. So it's more of a you know, working relationship than a you know, dictatorship on that one. Any questions? Any thoughts? If not,
well, if no one's going to jump in, I'm happy to do so. This is Julia Coster with the National Capital Planning Commission. And I appreciate your closing comments there. I in the breakout groups, I believe I'd spoken specifically to 6.6, and at a minimum would say just reword it, because I don't think trying to regulate the federal government is at the moment within your purview. And it sends potentially the wrong message when, as you described it, this is more to figure out ways to work in concert. And I mentioned, for example, that DOEE sits on NCPC's coordinating committee. So there's an opportunity to offer comments about flooding on every federal project in the district as it comes through our review. And there are also district representatives on the commission that could really strengthen that message. So certainly we're interested in working closely with the district on ways to figure out how federal requirements for flood management and flood risk management align with district requirements so that there's no weak links in the chain. And also to see if there are interesting ways to perhaps like along the rivers or in specific geographic areas to have shared standards and to tackle, you know, already built buildings that may not be as flood proof as we want. I also, just a quick question, I don't know if it's here or in the prior section. We had some discussions about just general coordination with groups like COG and some of the efforts they're doing, like the MIRR study in the district. And I would be remiss if I didn't try and figure out where in this work program, all of those resilience planning lassos from the comp plan which I think kind of on a coordination effort present an opportunity to look at a lot of the flood risk areas and think about resilience planning. So thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Thank you. There should be an opportunity for that to be in another section with coordination and planning of a response. I believe that's category 9. So I think that will be mentioned later. But I do have some subjects in the category 6 that we definitely could do with some coordination with local, federal or any type of organizations that are conducting these studies and providing information both from FEMA, from outside, and that we could use to better categorize some of these efforts.
Hey, Chris, this is Salil. Do you see an opportunity in this category to connect with the insurance category? I see some co-benefits there all the way through.
So I'm very much open to any type of insurance ideas, or maybe some things, some points, or some levels of improvement with our current either code or legislative efforts to give baselines so that they can then draw and then use those as examples to whatever need. But I'm real hesitant in providing insurance ideas or issues that would be a financial level instead of more of a regulatory or building safety and type of program like that. It's insurance and codes. They are hand in hand, but usually they're on either side. They're not integrated. But I'm certainly willing to hear any type of cooperation between those.
Right. Just changes. Just throwing this out. Just changes to any configurations in the low-lying basement area in regulations that would then minimize damage. That would help with the insurance premiums being not as high. So there's
and that's something that we can definitely look into, because when doing work in residential or commercial, you're either an existing building or you're a brand new building. Those two things, or substantial improvement to an existing. So there are a lot of things that could trigger those indicators that insurance is looking for, so that you've met a certain threshold. And most certainly, we can identify those and provide those so that they can know what improvements, what mitigation efforts, what protections by either code or by their renovation or alteration would satisfy a particular insurance requirement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do want to keep us on time, number one, but then also bring up, this is a category that's coming up, but in the chat from Stephen, DPR and OP have secured funding from FEMA to do some pilot resilient small parks and open space projects that could be a model for spaces across the district. So thank you. And again, we are categorizing all these updates in the chat, and we'll have them for review and response if necessary.
Thanks, Kim. I think it's probably just worth highlighting, I think with, to Director Wells' point, we don't have to wait till November to start working on any of this stuff. The construction codes, as Chris mentioned, that's kind of like already in progress. Similarly, very, very closely related is DOE's own flood hazard rules. We're in the process of trying to go through an updated rulemaking there. And then some of you may have seen the City Council took up a proposed legislation for the Flood Resilience Amendment Act, which would be some enabling legislation related to the flood hazard rules that DOE is proposing. So just highlighting some things that are already kind of in the works, but still have room for feedback. All right, so let's move on. Category 7, mapping and modeling. So this is jointly DC Water and DOEE, and I'm going to pass it to Meredith to take us through this one.
Hello, this is Meredith Upchurch with DOEE. I'm going to talk about the mapping and modeling category. So we've got a really great start on this already. There are a tremendous number of maps and models that do exist to identify flood risk areas. The major effort and initiative we are starting right now is DOEE's integrated flood model. We should be starting that in the next few months. We have found that we don't think we can fully complete that project given the current funding, so we are in the process of requesting additional funding for that, which we think would significantly allow us to produce the maps and risk assessments that we want to pursue. I'm going to jump down first to or next to action 7.3 and 7.4. So this kind of speaks to what we're working on with the integrated flood model, and that's pulling all of the models together that do exist. Army Corps of Engineers has quite a few. There have been ones done with various project specific. So we want, and we know many other jurisdictions have done a lot of models since we border many Maryland and Virginia jurisdictions. MWCOG is also bringing jurisdictions together to talk about flooding issues because it's such a significant region-wide and nationwide problem, as General Manager Gaddis mentioned. So these are some efforts that are more on paper efforts. So so some of this effort, will be in the low category, which is good, but we can get this paper, or electronic information together and make it more available to people. Action 7.5, updating the FEMA floodplain maps. So that's also an effort that is partially in progress. Some of the models have been run, and what this will do is it will take more current modeling data and actually refine the boundaries of where the 100-year floodplain is, the 500-year floodplain, and some of the things that we found in Watts Branch is it may actually reduce the area of the 100-year floodplain such that residents or structures that are now said to be in the 100-year floodplain may actually come out of the floodplain, which improves their insurance costs and reduces the risk. It more accurately predicts the risk. So those are some of the formal processes updating the FEMA floodplain maps. And we're looking for additional funding. And now I'm going to go back to action 7.2. Installing additional rain gauges and doing storm sewer monitoring to help us increase our data knowledge. Some of these can be simple, not too costly, have a larger impact. Some of them will be more costly. So, and there's a lot of options, some in stream, some at different government-owned sites around the city. USGS has a number of gauges that are used and data mined and available to watch online in many cases. So the mapping is a combination of some things that are more in the data management effort and can have scales of benefit from neighborhood specific to citywide, but do require funding. Are there any questions or comments on our mapping and modeling action ideas?
This is Philip, and I'll just mention that, if we were to go down the path of looking at a parametric insurance program, I think rain gauges monitoring, monitoring is very key to parametric insurance because it's triggered when, when the flooding reaches such a level or something like that. So, being able to monitor, and having the monitoring close to where be a good predictor of losses is key to a successful parametric program. So that's something that, if as you go down that route, I think we'd want to kind of make sure that that we keep that in mind.
So would that be a requirement of that insurance type, that we be able to confidently know, what rain was received?
Well, it depends on how you. I mean, it depends on how you set up the parametric program. But that's typically the way parametric programs, again, where a typical insurance policy is, reimburse you for loss. So they look at the loss, if it was covered, that it was the result of a covered incident, and then pay you for that. A parametric program does not look at losses, it looks at for a trigger. And so, we could set the triggers different ways, but these are the kind of things that would be potentially useful as a trigger.
Yeah, that's really good to know. Thank you for bringing that up. We need to connect these actions together.
Meredith, one of the other things talked about in category 7, I think may have been repeated in 9 at the action team level, was also leveraging the installed cameras around the city to look at the streets and get an advance warning of flooding. Because right now they're used for different purposes, but there's no reason why they can't be multi-use.
Yes, that's an excellent suggestion. Other comments?
I see one in the chat from Lindsay about public projects requiring, climate resilience design standards. Yeah, I think that's something that DC's Chief Resilience Officer, Melissa, has been kind of working on, see if we can get it into the capital budget process. I'd have to check in where we are.
The resilient design guidelines were released last year.
Right. Yeah, we do have resilient design guidelines. What I can't remember is whether they've been included in like the budget for publicly funded projects, but we'll take a look.
Thanks, Nicholas. Something just to clarify that I think is really innovative with the Massachusetts example, and why I bring it up now, is it's basically an interactive platform where you put in the address and it provides you kind of a climate risk analysis. So you understand not only the design guidelines that are available to you, but which ones are applicable to you. And it has that nice regulatory piece where publicly funded projects are required to use it, but it is open source and can be used by the private sector as well.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's ambitious.
Yeah,
Great.
thank you for sending the
Thank
link. Though. We love those examples. And maybe it ties into the legislation category too. All right.
Nick, this is Uwe Brandes.
Hey, Uwe.
I just have a quick comment and just wanted to, first of all, congratulate everyone on this amazing collaborative effort. In this section, I think the assumption is that there'll only be a few agencies, maybe DOEE and DC Water, actually doing modeling. But if the recommendations of the task force are going to be revisited on an annual basis moving forward, it seems to me that it would be very useful to have an explicit set of modeling guidelines that the task force established that would be shared across any entity that was doing modeling in the future. And those may change over time, but right now, modeling assumptions tend to be buried in the modeling effort. And I believe that there's significant coordination challenges associated with uniformly adopting modeling assumptions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Uwe. I mean, you're totally right. You know, I've seen many models of like the Anacostia River that, you know, some of them use this number for sea level rise, some of them are using, you know, you know, the 2015 LiDAR data versus 2018, and yeah, it's hard to keep track. So that's a good comment. I think we can definitely.
I think that might be the intent of action 7.4.
Yeah.
Need to look at the details on that again.
Yeah. No, but it's a good specific thing for us to think about. Okay, great.
I think we can move on.
So, yeah, category 8. Let's see. Yes, planning and coordination. So it's kind of almost like a catch-all category here, and pass it back to Alan from Denmark.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So this, I think, is definitely a category that can probably be built out more. So right now there are four main actions here with some sub actions under the public outreach. So the first action is coordinating closely with DC Silver Jackets and designating attendees from DC agencies to attend that. And all of these, I'll just note, all of these are fairly low time and cost and medium effort, with varying resilience and prioritization outcomes as well as scale benefit. And that's partly because of the way that benefit and value is framed. A lot of these have not a huge amount of tangible value in that they won't create anything physical, but they will help streamline our efforts to create physical things and responses in the future. So attending DC Silver Jackets. Second one is coordinated public outreach. This is one I think that there's a lot of opportunity to continue to build out. Right now we have 3, which is working with WMATA on advertising, Flood Week events, and then the Ready DC website enhancement. And then the last 2 are formalizing the DC Drainage Committee and designating members to that. And finally, clarifying maintenance responsibilities for flood infrastructure. And one thing the last thing I'll just note on 8.4 is that was one that I think was flagged in our meeting last week that would probably be more effort and time than it may appear, because this is a massive set of responsibilities. I think maybe an increase in effort and time as well as an increase in the outcome or the scale of the benefit, but probably a larger one than we had initially listed. So I'll pause there. I would love any kind of additions, suggestions. Oh, and sorry, I will not pause there. One thing I'll just add, I think that Julia had said earlier, is that we should add coordination with COG on this. And that it kind of overlaps, I think, between category 7 and category 8. But definitely want to make sure to include that. Okay, now I'll pause, see if there's anything else to add.
I'll just note, you know, I think the trick for, so, you know, Alan, you mentioned the benefit and value of these things is, you know, when you compare it to like a levy or something like that, it isn't going to rise up to that level. But I think it's also worth pointing out that the charge for the task force is to have an action plan, at least one for every category. So if we're thinking about if you're prioritizing within a category, you know, you can start to maybe see some differences, even just within the category, even if it won't measure up to, you know, an entire levy project type benefit. Just throwing that out there.
Hey, Alan, this is great. Under 8.2, would an outreach to schools and getting schools engaged be part of that? Okay. I know we talked about it. It just didn't make the matrix.
Yeah, I think 100%. I'll make another note of that to make sure it gets added.
Yeah, I don't think we've done a thorough brainstorming on all the public outreach approaches that can be done. There's certainly others we can add in there.
We've had a lot of discussions too, and we just have to go and update the matrix.
Mhm.
And I certainly know for the resilient part wasn't fully updated.
Yeah, and also to note that this is not the only place where public outreach is captured within all of these actions. Each action must also include the public outreach element. So.
But yeah, Meredith, I think to your point, this is kind of our initial list, but I don't know that this is in consultation with a lot of the actual public outreach experts that we have within DC government. So I think, yeah, there could be a lot more under this.
Sure.
Thank you all. I
Right.
do want to keep us moving along. Thank you. Category 9.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, so last category here to close it out. So flood emergency planning, response and recovery, and turn it over to HCMA. I think this might be Wes and Carolyn.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Carolyn here. And so myself and Wes Leary, we are both from DCHCMA, and we're the co-leads for this category. So based on the actions that you see here, this is more specific to how the district as a whole, both HCMA-led and interagency-wide, can take advantage of some of the tools that we already have in place, which we've started to look into to both internally kind of communicate and coordinate our efforts for in response to a flooding event, but also to provide services readily to residents in a more streamlined approach. And so what we've been doing so far is kind of analyzing what tools we currently have.
Carolyn, can we ask you to turn your volume up just a bit, please?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Thank you.
Is that better there?
Let's do it one more time.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. So just wanted to iterate that for these 4 actions, we've started looking at the tools and technology that we currently have in place to kind of assess where we're at and what tools HCMA is aware of and which ones we have available from other partner agencies, either at DC Water or otherwise, that we can capitalize on for this coordination need. And then additionally, what projects are in play that we can kind of prepare to socialize out to residents to kind of give them a streamlined for action 9.4, a more streamlined approach to how they report calls for assistance. And so being able to socialize that, having that public facing piece, and then making sure that we have a set plan on that. So Wes, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Hey, Carolyn, do you mind if I jump in for a second?
Absolutely.
Thank you much. My favorite one's 9.4.
I'm here. Good. You can go. I'll talk after you.
Thank you much. Sorry for that. That's one that I know we for one have been dealing with for a fair amount, because anytime there is a flood and people's homes flood, they do pick up the phone and call DC Water, regardless of what the issue is. And I think the residents, it would really help them if there is a way that their issues can be triaged so they don't have to call multiple agencies to find out who can help them. So that, to me, that's a phenomenal, quick return on investment kind of that falls into the win-win top left corner. I really love that one. Thank you for having it there.
Hey, hello everyone. How you doing? My name is Wesley. I haven't been on these calls, but I like to get the emails now. And Carolyn, I'm the co-lead for this. I like that you brought up 9.4 because that's something we have been working on. I see some people that were here that were on our centralized flood clause we had earlier in 2021, where we tried to develop a centralized flooding system for calls, because people were calling the council members, people were calling DC Water, people were calling everywhere they could call, and so we had so much data coming into the system. We didn't know where it was coming from, what was accurate. What we want to do is develop a centralized flooding system so it can be much more streamlined and people can have one point of access where they can call, and then we can get this this system in place. And any feedback or questions about that would be welcome.
Wesley, just for everybody's sake, we did not rehearse this. We just ended up with the same one.
Yes, we did.
So I'll just throw out, this is Philip again. So for the, just to take the example of the Affordable Care Act, the theory that they operated under was no wrong door. So rather than trying to force everybody to go to one place, we worked at it kind of the other way, that we coordinated among the people who who the consumers might reach out to, so that whoever they went to first could get them to the right place. So just as a thought to keep that in mind as you're looking forward, as a way to go about trying to do that, that may be a way to think.
Thanks.
Maybe one other one to add on here. I know HCMA and DDOT and DOE have been talking about applying for a grant or using some grant money for flood warning signs. There's a couple of areas in the city that we know are get flooded frequently, and so installing kind of like an automatic flashing sign that says don't drive here if it's underwater. So that that's an idea that we probably want to add and are pursuing some grant funding for.
Yep, we put that as one of the notes here as well. Also, providing alerts to know when or where there's flooding. That would be in our 9.2, implement an early severe weather warning system. That would be something that falls in that category.
Nick, that's fantastic. And Wesley, is there any potential to extend it to underpasses that typically flood? Same concept.
Exactly, yes.
Wonderful.
All right. I think we can close out this portion of the action team report out. I'll pass it back to Monty and Kim. Or maybe to Opera.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everybody, for participating. Again, lots of great detail, good opportunity to coordinate as agencies, and we are really happy for the participation. So thank you, everyone, for thinking and taking some action on some of these notes. And again, like Nick has also reminded us, that Director Wells invited us all to not wait. We can do some things. This is called an action team, because we are working on things, and we're being in a very responsive manner. So so we're going to continue to keep that in mind as we continue to do this work. So with that, I'd like to bring up Opera, please, to talk about the public listening sessions.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Monty. I've been enjoying the conversation that we've had thus far, especially when we talk about the inclusivity and the commitment and the inclusion of the communities in which we're trying to serve. So I wanted to use this time to let you all know, as it has been mentioned over and over, that we are planning a phased process of getting this information out to the community, but not just getting the information out to the community, but listening to them, which is why we're calling it a public listening session. So they will be done online, virtual. The platform, we're still working on what that will be because we want to make sure that it's the most feasible and user-friendly for all of our members. But the plan is to have at least 3 in this first round, and we would like to have them prior to our next task force meeting. So we're looking anywhere between the first 2 weeks of March to hold this. And this engagement process really is to uplift and signify how are we going to integrate the communities in all of these great plans. We have a host of experts, and you all have been doing this work and are passionate about this work. And so we want that passion to be overlaid also with the passion and the voices of our community. And that's why we are having these listening sessions, and the community has been at the forefront of all of this. And so the listening sessions serves as a vehicle to have them integrated into this plan. So as we're talking about the actions, and as we're talking about these big ideas, and as we're talking about if a one call source makes sense, or if there needs to be one unified line or separate lines, or if everyone should have the same type of line or script for when any of our members and our neighbors call, those are the conversations and hopefully the feedback that we would like to hear. We are asking that every member of the task force attend. I know your schedules are taxing, and the time that you've already lended to this is invaluable, but it would just show so much camaraderie and the passion, again, that you all are bringing if we could all attend, or at least have representatives at each session. So as the plans and the dates get solidified for this, again, this first iteration of these public listening sessions, all of you all will be made aware, and we will definitely make advance notification to the community as well in the invite. And I think I'm turning this over to Miss Meredith to talk next steps.
Yes. Next slide.
Maybe Meredith, before we, I just want to make sure we pause and give a chance for any feedback on the listening sessions.
Yep.
There may not be any, but just
yeah, we're in
the open space.
Right, we're in the planning stage.
Right. So if there are any ideas on how we should be hosting these public listening sessions, how we should be advancing them, how we should, one, be advertising them, please, but also how they should be set. We definitely want the conversation to be intimate and transparent. And so what is the platform and the setting, and what questions should we be leading with? Should there be any leading questions? All of that is to be taken into consideration as we roll out this conversation and this listening tour with care. So hearing from you all and the best approaches, we're more than happy to do that.
Thank you, Opera. I think that's, I think folks are thinking, and of course, they will send you emails, flood your inbox afterwards with lots of great ideas. Meredith, if you want to go ahead and talk about the next steps and your outtake notes, as well as you seem to always be giving some kind of homework. So maybe you might have some homework to assign as well. So we'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, pretty much. I get to do the homework assignments. So this is just looking at what we are going to be doing between now and the next task force meeting. We will have action team meetings in February. I think the second week in February. So before those next action team meetings, we have some requests for agencies. One is to let us know if you have any initiative where you need an endorsement or support from the task force, like Nick mentioned, DOEE has a budget enhancement request for flood smart homes. There's a grant request for some other flood emergency warning systems. So just, you know, bring that forward, and then we can determine how to get that support that you may need, because we want to get the resources we need to make all these actions happen. We had a great discussion on the effort benefit evaluations, also the benefit effort matrix. So if you have any updates on those evaluations, send those to us and we'll make some refinements so we can discuss those at the next action team meetings. We have been collecting reports, number 3 here, reports and interagency efforts. We want to know everything that's going on, everything that's been created. So we have a collaboration document that's, the link has been in some of the emails sent out by the task force. So we want to make sure we're capturing all those. So please provide any relevant reports or efforts that you haven't provided already. And going into those next action team meetings, we want to begin to identify which agencies are going to lead these actions. So please come ready to step up on which actions plans your agency is going to lead and prepare. We've got the public listening sessions coming up, so please plan to attend those. And you can always reach us at our email address, dcfloodtaskforce@dc.gov. Anything else to add from any other team members? Okay, let's go on.
All right, well, thank you, Meredith. So just to close things out, we're going to just talk about the upcoming meetings or just remind you of the schedule. We have the Residential Resilient meeting, action team meeting on February 8th. We have the Governance and Coordination meeting on February 11th, keeping busy. And then we'll kick off our public listening sessions during March. Those dates again will be publicized in many different ways. And again, we do ask that if you have other listservs or any kind of groups that you like us to push out this information to, please let us know. We will incorporate that with our running list that we're creating now. And then the next full task force meeting will be on March 16th. Next slide. Okay, so if we could have Director Wells and CEO Gaddis share a few closing remarks before we adjourn our meeting.
Am I mic'd in? Am I good?
You are. We can hear you loud and clear.
Good. Well, this is a lot of great work, and I really appreciate the matrix and the prioritization. What I also want to note, you know, Director Gaddis and I talked earlier, and I appreciate the emphasis on not just having the opportunity to co-opt and enroll the public officials, certainly with the DC Council recently having a hearing on resiliency and how this has become a priority for them, and of course for the mayor and our agency directors. But I appreciate this is also an opportunity to educate and enroll the public in this work, to see who's responsible, how this works, what's possible, and what they're to expect and advocate for. So again, Mr. Gaddis reminded me the real opportunity of enrolling the public in this work so that we have support from the residents and those that pay the bills for the work that we're doing. So thanks again, and this is great work.
Thank you, Chairman
Thank you.
Wells. Yeah, thank you, Chairman Wells, and thank you, Monty. I mean, I don't want to prolong us any longer than what we've gone. Chairman Wells, I think, did a great job of closing, and I concur with all that he said. It is remarkable and unbelievable the ideas that we already have and what people are coming up with. And the only thing I can say, just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great work, and all the agencies coming in and doing this together is remarkable. And we will we will be that city, that community that will that others will look to when they begin to go down this road of solving the same issue in their community. So thank you all very much. Have a great evening.
Mr. Gaddis, I love that visionary statement. I'm sure we'll look back on this process and be very proud, all of us involved. And I just, again, want to thank you all for the time. We do have a very busy schedule. We're meeting monthly. And so your ideas in the meantime, please reach out to the DC Water and DOEE staff leads. That's both Salil, Opera, Meredith, and Nick, respectively. And please visit the website. We have lots of information there. If you are trying to catch up, miss something, and you feel like you need to just spend some time with looking at it on your screen or printing it out, well, just keep it on your screen since we're going to be environmentally sensitive, but it's all on the website. It's archived there, and upcoming meeting notices and so forth. We appreciate your time, and we are going to adjourn at 3:53, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much, everyone.